Peace and welcome to the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. Thanks for watching and subscribing to our channel.
Facts changes perspective, because the solar facts are introducing you to the perspective of the solar system from the vantage point of view of the sun. So typically when you look at the solar system, you look at the sun in the center, and you look at all of the different planets revolving around the sun. Keep in mind that any planet that you see that's rotating, the planet rotated before it revolved. So for example, when you look at the Earth, before the Earth was in an orbit to revolve around the sun, it first rotated on its own axis. So your rotation on your axis is primary, not your revolution. Your revolution is the second aspect. So when you look at the creation of the solar system, you take it all the way back here to the 9th degree and the 1 of 14s. Down in the bottom, it says the holy and universal flag of Islam is the greatest only known flag of the universe. It's everything. Sun, moon, and stars, they are planets. Planets are something that has been grown or made from the beginning. So it's telling you that the sun, the moon, and the star are also planets. It's important to understand that, because some people may think that the sun is not a planet, or that the moon is not a planet, or stars are not planets, right? So when you're talking about the creation of the solar system, the planets are fragments or components of the first great sun. The difference between a star and a planet is its temperature. You have other different variations in terms of its composition and the elements that are present there. Some may be more present than others, but what really distinguishes them is these are stars that have cooled off and have created an atmosphere or an environment. If you look at the Earth, it created the environment that was able to sustain and maintain life. But the core of the planet, of the Earth, is like a sun. It's hot. And if a man knows how to push your buttons, he'll see it. If you know what your triggers are, you're gonna see it, right? So now, when you go into the solar facts, it's describing and talking about the solar system from the vantage point of view of the sun, the perspective of the sun. So the distance of these planets are based upon their distance from the sun. Also, when we talked about the Asiatic calendar, 25,000 year cycle, and we talked about the ages, the 2,160 year ages, which comprise the entire 25,000 year cycle. That calendar is based upon the vantage point of view of the sun. So we're talking about the planets, we're talking about the constellations in correspondence to the vantage point of the sun. It's important that I say this, because once you get into the science of like astrology, Hellenistic astrology, and those particular things, it shifts the perspective of your vantage point of view. And that is also one of the reasons why some people may not validate or look at the benefit of astrology, because they're looking at it from the vantage point of view of the sun. So looking at it from the vantage point of view of the sun, if you're looking at the solar system, there is no life on the sun, at least life as we know it on Earth. So if you're looking at things from the perspective of being the sun and the planets rotating or revolving around you, if someone's sitting there striving to describe to you the various different influences that the planets have, it's going to be very difficult for you to conceptualize it because you're looking at it from the perspective of the sun, where there is no life. So just psychologically, it's difficult for you to rationalize how there is some kind of influence when you're looking at things from a solar fact perspective, right? So now when you look at these solar facts, oftentimes when you come in contact with some 5%ers and you ask them, what is the meaning of the solar facts? They may just look at Mercury and say it's 36 million miles away from the sun. So they may just break it down mathematically and say Mercury is understanding equality, right? It's the closest planet to the sun. So if planets, from the perspective of some being female in nature, represent also their orbit and proximity to you, some brothers may just look at those planets as various different women within his life. So Mercury, she's close to him. That may be like a sister to him. She's the closest, she's a confidant. When you take it into Mercury, when you look at it in like Greek or Roman perspectives or philosophy, Mercury is considered the communicator. And also if you take it into like ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt, Mercury corresponds to Tahuti, who is the communicator, right? Tahuti in ancient Kemet is stylized as an ibis bird, has a long beak that looks like a pin. So when our people observe the ibis bird or the ibis bird seeking and looking for food along the water or the shores, it looked as if it was writing. It looks like that. Looks like a scribe. So we use that as an archetype for communication and being a scribe, right? So when you look at ancient Kemetic reliefs and you see Tahuti being represented, he is represented as the communicator. Once you go down through Greek and Roman societies, they took that and transposed it based upon their perspectives. And it went from Tahuti, and you take it all the way to America, you get Flash Gordon, or you get Flash in the DC comics, right? Because you look at Flash, he has the wings of Mercury, he runs real fast, right? That goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, in the form of Tahuti, right? So I say that to say, some brothers or some people may look at those planets in terms of not only their composition, but also their archetype in ancient Kemet as well as ancient Greek and Roman societies. So if you want to get a deeper understanding of the different planets and their correspondences, for example, you look at Venus. Venus is 67 million miles away from the sun. Venus corresponds to Aphrodite. She's the goddess of love, right? And sensuality and beauty and all of those various different qualities. From the perspective of a man, looking at himself as the sun being central to that solar system, Venus may just be the chick that he's smashing. Venus don't hold life. Venus is also considered to be the twin of the Earth. So Venus is like a side chick to some dudes, right? So it's good to be able to go and to look at the different ways that these planets have been historically described. Sometimes those descriptions are based upon their elemental composition. So Venus has a very a high nitrogen atmosphere, right? So nitrogen, I think it's nitrogen, is something that can lull you to sleep for good. Right? So going back to what I said about a side chick, some dudes have women in their life that are just like Venus. She's like a fly trap. And her atmosphere or environment can literally lull him to sleep. So if you went to Venus, you would die because you couldn't breathe in that kind of atmosphere. All of the planets have those type of backgrounds to them, especially when you go looking into like Roman and Greek society. Because one of the things that you'll see in Greek and Roman society is the psychodrama that is connected to these archetypes. So you will see how Venus expresses herself, or in the form of Aphrodite. You'll see how she corresponds and she interacts with some of the other deities. So a lot of times when people are talking about astrology, they're utilizing the more Western perspective of these archetypes and their interaction not only with one another, but if the planets are aligned a certain way, or they're at a certain alignment when you're born, that these archetypes have somewhat of an influence on your life.